Welcome to the Athletic Development Show. A very special guest today, James Cheers, one of the founding members of Core Advantage. Incredible coach, a bit under the radar, so I think a bit of a treat for you guys to hear a brilliant coach who's more brilliant at coaching than he is at self-promoting. And those kind of people are actually really interesting to listen to. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's exciting to be here. I've been following the show, and you've had some great guests. So,
and the last time, because you were technically on the show about 100 episodes ago, weren't you? Like that was back in the day at Oakley. Yeah,
back when we just started podcasting and had no idea what we were doing.
No idea. We're not that we're much better now, but still, we're trying. So James, bit of context for those that don't know. James was one of the, as I said, the founding coaches at Core Advantage, and was with us for 6 years. I think it was a good stretch. And then one day, one of the worst days of my life, he came and he said, "I need to talk to you." And he said, I'm going to quit. The driving was it was very much a lifestyle thing. The driving was too much. And to give you a sense, and I'm not telling this to make you feel bad, James, just to give you a sense of the magnitude of that. I nearly vomited, like on the spot. I nearly just vomited. I was so distressed at the idea of losing you. So it was a real loss for us. But I think one of the most important things is to be grateful of the time you had with people. And you were just an incredible person for our business, and it maybe wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for your incredible work. And so I'm super psyched to see you thriving in your new the new business, which is amazing. So I want to get into that as well today. So there's heaps to talk about. So I guess the first thing I'd like to ask you though, when you came in to Core Advantage, you were second year. You were a quiet boy, like you were a boy.
Yeah. I think back to that all the time. There are a bunch of things. Well, first off, I was second year. I wasn't supposed to do the placement until third year.
Yeah.
So I got pulled up by all the head of department and things like that, telling me, "What are you doing? You're applying for this when you're not supposed to." So I was younger than I should have been.
Yeah.
Didn't know what a strength and conditioning coach was. Didn't know anything about athletic development. It was just really, oh, this looks interesting. I like basketball. Why don't I go try this internship? And day one with you and Rob Blinkhorn running that internship, I just had this whole world, just my eyes open to this whole new world of this is what's possible and this is what we can do. And I was very, very young and very naive and didn't know what I was getting myself into.
And very quiet as well. I remember. So who was in your cohort?
Oh, it's such a long time ago. There were five of us. That.
There was you. Was Jacob rather? Had he already gone through the year before?
So I think I was the second internship from when Rob started running it. So Jacob was first. I did the second one, and then it was.
And so we had you and we had Ali in that. The reason I remember Ali being in that one is that she was a very very gregarious person.
Yeah, opposite to me.
And she
was very quiet.
Very quiet. And she came and visited us at the new place, maybe 3 years later or whatever it was. And you were out there coaching and engaging with everyone and just in command of the room. And she's gone, "Is that James?" Like she actually didn't believe it was you. So it was quite the transformation. So you improved at the most incredible rate. You just kept getting better every single week. And I think you attended 100% of the sessions. Like
the only one I missed is the one you guys cancelled on me. I was driving up and I got a call from Rob saying, "Hey, we actually can't run it today." I'm like, "No worries."
That's amazing. And what? So that commitment was huge. Where do you get that from? Like, that's an unusual level of lock-in. Was it just that you recognized the opportunity, or was that just a thing that you apply to everything?
It was a mixture of things. It was a hunger to learn. I had this, whole world of strength and conditioning, like I said, opened up before me that I didn't quite realize was there, because I sort of went into uni knowing I really enjoyed, the anatomy and learning about the human body and, all that side of things, but I didn't sort of know where I was actually going to end up and go with it. And so when that pathway opened up, I just jumped on it and just was soaking up everything. And I was quiet, and I think one of the big reasons I was quiet is I was just soaking everything up. I was just getting all the inputs and building the confidence and the knowledge, so then I could put that out. And I think that was it played a big part in becoming a better coach, was speaking once I knew what I was talking about. And that's
a novel concept at the moment.
Yeah, I know, because I guess I know there's things like imposter syndrome and all those bits and pieces that coaches can experience some of the time. There's so much to know, and it's a never-ending process of learning the trade. And I was just a big sponge at the start, and
yeah. And I'm curious to how you feel about the communication arms race that's going on at the moment. It's like everyone is just going bananas on Instagram with telling everyone everything. It's an interesting, and people are launching internships, like their own mentorships when they've been practicing in the industry for like 3,000 hours. Like it's a really interesting space. How do you feel about all of that?
Personally, on the business side of things, I can't stand it. I gave the Instagram a solid crack, and I'll have to get back into it because it's what you got to do as a business owner. And it'll have to something that I do maintain. But personally, I can't really stand it. Professionally, it's a huge resource. I think one of the big benefits of doing my bachelor's and then doing my master's and then working at Core Advantage and soaking up all of that information was just the ability to differentiate between what's good intel and what's not. And obviously that's a bit of a superpower that you gain over years of coaching and studying. But then the flip side of that is so many people will suffer from not being able to separate those things.
Yeah.
There's certain podcasts I listen to and YouTube videos and books and things like that. You're like, that was a fantastic book, but I know that these components, they won't make it into my new model of strength and conditioning, whereas these ones are worth the time. So it's a bit of a catch-22. It's good and it's bad. But the business Instagram will need some work down the line.
Yeah,
I think
I'll
have to work on that.
No, yours is really good. I really enjoy your stuff. It's because it's not gimmicky and it's not attention grabby. It's just fundamentals. Just good info. Yeah. Tell me how you brought up the training model. What are the new things that because things evolve, and obviously when you left Core Advantage, it was very much you were adding to the training model at Core Advantage, but also going along with the principles. Are there things that you're now seeing, and we've also continued to move along, so it's not like we're static from 2019 or whatever. Like things have evolved for us in terms of how we approach stuff. What have you changed your mind about in the last couple of years, if anything, or what are the new points of emphasis?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think there's been any major flips or changes because at the end of the day, there's a few principles in strength and conditioning, and there's a million ways to implement those principles. But there's a few core principles that will really drive it. At the end of the day, it's your specific adaptations to imposed demands. It's progressive overload. It's all those sorts of things. It's more the context around the athlete and their injuries and their sport and how you're going to best get that out of them, and personalities as well. Different athletes respond to coaching differently and things like that. I'm a big systems guy. I did work on a lot of systems at Core Advantage, and
you made the Mona Lisa,
continued that.
Our amazing program, our sticky taped, hand coded program document in numbers.
I should have just learned to code from the start, shouldn't I? Yeah.
Do you know it's funny? Jacob and my brother Tommy, who's the CEO at Core Advantage, they've both learned to code a bit now. And like, if I had a time machine, I would have gone back and when you were basically de facto coding in numbers, I probably would go back now and go, you know what? Let's just learn to code and make some more stuff, because that was a hard way to do it.
It was, but I love the systems. It's just, I think of it just as a giant model that you slowly upgrade over time. You continue to challenge your beliefs. I'm a big fan of going online and typing the opposite of what I believe to be true, and going down the rabbit hole a little bit. It's confronting sometimes because, like you said, there's so much information out there now, and everyone's throwing up podcasts and YouTube videos and blogs. And it's very interesting to say, hey, there's this whole other side of things, of course, because you've got the algorithm, and the things you believe you'll see more of, and so it's nice to challenge that every now and then. And sometimes you pick up new things, or you tweak your ideas a little bit, or just the way you explain things to athletes.
I love that. Is the hottest hot tip I reckon we've had in the history of this podcast. Just type in the opposite of what you believe and see what you get. I think that's great. And because you'll either learn more, or potentially, if it turns out that you're actually absolutely spot on, you learn how to dismantle that argument. Like you're learning, so you can't lose doing that. That's brilliant.
Yeah. It's very confronting, of course, because you've spent so much time, you're building your model and your beliefs, and you sort of got to question that every now and then.
I love it. Tell us about this. So the beautiful thing about what you're doing now with Peninsula Sports Performance is, you've got an amazing gym, and I'm still with COVID. I've not been able to get down there and have a look and a lift, but it looks just beautiful. So
interesting year to open a gym.
Yeah. What percentage have you been opened? Like, since it must be really low. Like since you've opened, you've been actually able to trade.
Yeah. So it opens when Feb 1st. So I signed the lease on January 1st.
Yep.
Which was nice. Start the new year. And then I opened the gym a month later, which was a hectic month.
Yep.
But I have been closed for, I worked it out a couple of weeks. It was like a quarter of the lifetime of my business. It was like 50 or 60 days.
Crazy.
And it's less the total amount of time and more the stop start. And I'm lucky that when I did open the facility, I already had a really good core group of athletes and a really great little community. And they've been solid through this whole thing, it was just been a massive blessing.
Huge, isn't it?
We're
the same.
A whole other side of things to opening a gym, that community building.
It's really nice. We're the same. Like I was thinking about it this week, because the reality is, with the lack of government support, particularly this time around, I'm not sure we would have survived without our people sticking with us. So we've been super grateful that they've got that small community of people that absolutely believe in what we do and want us to be around for the future, and have kept supporting us. So and it's a testament though to what you're doing, is that people love what you're doing, and they know they want to be there when this is all over. So it's pretty cool. Tell us about the system. I reckon we did. I know we did lots of things wrong at Core Advantage, and we've been iterating and developing it. And you got to have a fresh start and just go, okay, I'm starting a business totally from scratch. I want to do it on my terms. Like, you're very intentional, and you've instead of driving to and from the city, and just losing a ridiculous percentage of your life behind the wheel of the car, you're now local. Tell us about how you set about designing the kind of gym and system that you wanted to operate.
Yeah. So I guess when I left Core Advantage, I was, I got my first client probably 2 or 3 weeks later, with nowhere to train. So I, approached a gym and was running PT out of there. And I did that for about a year. And over the course of that year, it was just thinking about, all right, where do I want to be, next year or the year after, where do I want this business to go? Because at that stage, I wasn't even sure how much I wanted to grow it, or, whether it was even the path I wanted to go down.
Because you were a bit unsure. You went away to your trip to Nepal, and that was a bit of a reflection point. You weren't sure exactly, you went away there, and I remember you stopped lifting, and it was a little bit of an alarm bell for me. I was like, oh, James isn't lifting.
Yeah. It was it was a time where I did question a lot, because sometimes you sort of stop and you look back and you're like, well, I've been on this pathway, flying down this river or wherever you're going, without really questioning, where am I going? Where do I want to end up? And that was one of the big reasons I did leave Core Advantage, because I think, well, where do I want to be in 10 years, 20 years? I want to be, on the peninsula where I grew up, working close to home, giving back to local, sporting clubs in the community and things like that. And then obviously it became the hard
getting out on your sea kayak and
the hard things, going for runs up the mountain and out for a surf and on the kayaks and things like that. So But yeah, so just question where I wanted to be, which I think is another, a good little, self-study, a good little exercise you can do.
Mm,
Where am I going? What's the end goal here? Where do I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
mm.
And then take the steps. And obviously, that was my thought process. And then, obviously, I sprung that on you, which we talked about at the start. But yeah, so it was a big time where I was questioning a lot. I was running the PT out of a gym, which is the first time I'd ever done that. I went straight from university to work at Core Advantage, hadn't worked in another gym, so that was a real eye opener.
What was the mentality shift like with that? Because it's like if I could just kind of give like that Matrix, in the Matrix where it's like they give him the download and it's like he's like, I know Kung Fu. Like,
yeah,
there's a moment when you start running your own business where you just go, I now see in one instance, I see everything differently. What was that
yeah.
experience like for you?
Well, at the gym, I think a lot of it was about the space that you could build.
Mm,
And I know you did a fantastic job with the layout at Core Advantage, and you've changed that since I left, and the place
mm,
looks fantastic. Working in that commercial gym environment, I just found the space really limited. My ability to coach, and coach effectively across bigger groups and offer everything that a junior athlete needs to excel.
mm.
And so a lot of that time was spent thinking about how I wanted to, how much space I needed, how I want to lay out the gym, things like that. And of course the systems that I wanted to put in place, obviously, because I'm going from working as part of a huge team as a coach to working by myself as the owner and doing all the finances and coaching and all the phone calls and consults and all on my own. So
Mm.
systems was similar, but then of course very different because it was a solo adventure.
And you started, because you end up with 12 jobs. Like, because you're like, I'm going to
You
be
do,
my own
yeah,
boss. It's like, no, I actually just
yeah,
sort of work for myself in 12 different ways. Like
yes, yeah. I've just got all my clients and my boss now.
you started, so you made the move to digital and then you went back, to the pen and paper, which is
Yeah,
really, I'd love to chat about that. So you moved to
yeah.
True Coach because you were looking for, more efficient system. But what did
Yep.
you find?
Well, there were just a bunch of things. I mean, obviously, I designed the system for programming that we were using at Core Advantage. I was very familiar with that, and the design of that programming template just allowed total freedom. You could build
Mm,
any program you like. It was all visible in one page, easy to see, room for notes, things like that. I just found that I was constantly compromising
yeah.
my program with the True Coach in how I could lay it out and what I wanted to do when.
Mm,
I think the biggest thing was when one of my athletes said, I hate looking at my phone all the time when I'm in the gym.
mm,
And so I started questioning the athletes about that. I'm like, yeah, actually, between every set, you got to look at, it's like work. You got to look at your phone and you got to scroll through the thing and fill things out. And that was some feedback I really took on board. And between that feedback and my own preferred coaching style and programming style, I went back to paper and pen, which everyone loved because it was the first time they had all used it. And they're
yeah.
like, oh, this is fantastic. I've got my clipboard, I've got my program, I get to carry it around with me, and there's a bit of ownership and
It's
things like
really
that.
interesting,
So
isn't it?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's very efficient because the way that you built the programming document with drop downs, where you could just select exercises really quickly, change
mm,
things. It's quite it's a good lesson that it's still quite quick. It seems like it would be slower, but actually from start to finish, it's a very efficient way of doing it. It's
yeah. And if I'm by myself as well, programming for 40 people,
mm,
and I've also got all these other jobs to do as the owner of the business, it just makes my life,
very
a whole
interesting.
lot easier.
Yeah, it's
And
sorry, go ahead.
I think the online coaching, software is fairly new and it's coming along at great paces. But I think it's not quite where I need it yet.
Mm,
But I will definitely be checking back in every in 3 years, 5 years,
yep.
see if it's up to scratch.
It gets better and better. It's interesting for us.
Yeah.
We had the idea that what we'll do is we wanted the online program because we want the ability for people to still easily do their own workout at another gym closer to them, because that's, we have people come from a long way often to train at Core Advantage. So there was a real impetus to have that.
Mm,
And I thought, well, what we'll do is we'll have that on iPads, which will actually force people, this is pre-COVID, force people to share, create more community, because I like forcing functions where you actually, people can't just be siloed doing their own thing. And so it all seemed
yeah.
perfect. And then COVID came, like, right, no one can share an iPad. Everyone's got to be on their phone. But
So your phone's on the floor at the moment?
yeah, phone's on the floor. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it works really well in that sense, but it means that everyone is carrying their phone around. Whereas I would rather have
Yeah.
probably, my real vision would be, could we have, I don't know, 10 iPads bolted around the gym? And
Mhm.
you can have multiple people each sharing an iPad on different tabs, and that way they're not in their phones, and also there is a bit of shared interaction. Because I do like the idea of capturing the data and knowing the workloads you're getting. But yeah, so the athletes like it. We don't mind it. But yeah, eventually I'd love to get once on the other side of this, get onto iPads. But
Yeah. Check back with me in
yeah, we'll
3 years.
see.
See my
Yeah,
opinion
yeah.
again. Yeah.
And tell us about the format. It's an open gym format, the same format we've moved to, so it's not
Yep.
class based. Um, how does that go? Because you have people come and train with you in the mornings, like you kind of just do your training and they can join
Yeah.
in.
Mornings are on and
Yep,
off. I've cancelled mornings at the
yep,
moment. So just doing
yep,
afternoons. But yeah, open gym model. Open for 4 hours in the evening, and people come in and grab their program that's
yep.
ready for them whenever they show up. I think the trickiest thing from going from a team to going to solo was that balance of initial consult, first
Mm,
session to third session, where the athletes really just trying to figure out the space and figure out the program and learn everything that you need to
mm,
teach them. To then your veterans that obviously they know what they're doing, but they still need to have that touching point with the coach. So it was a real balancing act, and there was a big thing I had to question was, gold standard. You want to sit down with an athlete, want to get their full injury history, you want to learn everything about them, design the
mm,
perfect program for them. But I found I just had to get them in and get them
mm,
started. Welcome to your first session. This is how we warm up, and just get started right from day one, which has worked really well, and saved me a lot of time. Which is a big theme, is trying to save time when you trying to do all the
mm.
jobs.
Because how many athletes have you got that you've got to look after at the moment?
I got up to 40
Yeah.
before lockdown.
Yeah, and you'll
Yeah.
end up probably. I think you'll probably end up at around 80 to 100 at some point. So
Yep.
you want to be in a good system that way. And so the consults, it's on the fly, on the floor with them, and you just get them going, and then you're
Yeah.
away.
I think, yeah, it's tricky. It's not something I would recommend to everyone. I think it's something I can get away with because I've been coaching for a fair while.
Yeah.
And so, you see the same patterns and the same issues and things like that
Mm.
after you've coached thousands of athletes.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not something I'd recommend to new people
No, that's a really good
because,
warning. Yeah, because
yeah,
for context, James was carrying the lion's share of our programming at Core Advantage. Like at one point, I think you were programming for like 120 people or something ridiculous, wasn't it?
higher,
Higher?
higher. Yeah, yeah, close to 200. Yeah,
And yeah, and that's just and so you just like you would have um, almost completely unparalleled reps in programming. Like very few people in this country would have programmed for as many people as you did. Like
yeah,
that was intense. And we wanted the ridiculous thing too of we wanted this volume, but also this intense customization. So it was a
yeah.
challenging balance.
Writing hand notes for everyone to tell them the changes they made to their program and what a
Yeah,
great job they're doing and all
yeah.
that sort of stuff.
The
Yeah,
post-it
it was
notes.
hectic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that was a big theme with my professional development is doing hard jobs and then figuring out how to do them smarter.
Mm,
Even with the work I was doing before I was coaching at Core Advantage, I worked as a gymnastics coach for a while. I worked with my dad a bunch, and then you go to coaching on the floor, and you're like, oh, okay,
mm.
this is easy. And then programming for 200 people, and now I've got my systems down on programming for 40, and it lasts a lot easier.
Yeah.
It's
T-
you know your standards
Tell us
change.
about working for your dad, because I reckon the work because your dad's quite an amazing man, an inspiring figure in terms of his work ethic. Um, I think that's great for people to hear about that as well, because that was a tough job, or lots of tough jobs. Yeah,
Yeah, lots of tough job and lots of learning when I was very young. So when I was year 10 to
yep,
16, summer I just finished year 10 and I picked up some work and I was what I was doing is driving dump trucks. I was driving compactors on landfills. I was driving excavators. I was working on transfer station. So you go
so
from
working at the tip.
not really have working
Yeah,
at the tip. Yeah, yeah. And I was you go from not really working to standing in, steel cap boots on concrete for 9 hours,
Mm,
telling people where to put their
mm,
rubbish, exhausted at the end of the day, to, getting to interact with athletes and, building community and having fun and programming and doing what you love. It's just like, this is what I want to do with my life. This is so much fun. It's hardly, you can hardly call it
mm,
work. And I think that having had that previous experience of like, oh, this is hard work, this is not what I want to do, to coaching and, enjoying life. And, well, it's the cliche, if you enjoy your work, you'll never
mm.
work a day in your life. And I think I really found that with having that experience of working really hard and then finding the
I
coaching.
I couldn't agree more. I reckon it should almost be compulsory to work a genuinely hard, physically difficult job
Yeah.
early because it just recalibrates you because you get people that have come through, maybe they've worked a bit in hospitality, and like, oh, it's really tough, and they've worked a bit in personal training. It's like, no, like they're all tough. No dismissing that they're tough, but actual like laboring level, sweltering heat, genuine prolonged
Hmm.
physical discomfort, like those jobs really help you go, I really want to use my brain for for my career.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
it was.
yeah.
I'm grateful that I went through that. Um, yeah, it was a good pathway.
Mm, yeah. And common denominator with you and
Yeah.
Jacob as well. Like he had a very similar thing with the fishing, where they would just work ridiculous hours for weeks on end in, sort of
Yeah.
death defying circumstances. Like his dad's missing three fingers. Like
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah. Builds
those
character, I
jobs are
reckon.
good. Um, I think it does. Yeah. Now, in terms of your learning, so you did
Yep.
the masters at ACU, which is obviously very valuable. Um, were there any big takeaways from that? Where you did that course, and you're like, I really didn't appreciate X.
Yeah, that's a great
Um,
question. I mean, the course is fantastic, and you learn so much information that you can't just Google. It's all of the
mm,
exams are open book. It's all on the computer, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's
mm,
so easy." Like, well, no, it's not a. You're answering questions that aren't you can't just search and find straight away. So the depth of
mm,
knowledge and how deep they went into all the specifics of strength and conditioning was absolutely amazing, and a really
mm,
good framework to then pick apart and add into my own method of coaching. I can't say there's any particular thing that I didn't enjoy. I think they're heavily based in research and research that's out
mm,
and proven and rock solid. But as anyone that's worked in the trenches and coached, hundreds of athletes, it's the science does take time to catch up. And if you can test
mm,
something 20 times with different athletes and find success with that, then you're going to add that into your framework and you're going to use that and refine upon it. But it might not necessarily be something that's completely 100% proven as the best way in the research. Just books
mm.
and texts and all those sort of things take time to catch up.
Yeah, it takes time, and sometimes they don't even ever catch up because there's not that motivation to do studies in that
Exactly.
particular area. So it can be just that no one's that interested, or no one's that interested slash getting funding to investigate that. So therefore, it just stays
Yeah.
unexplored.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in terms of your ongoing learning these days,
Yes.
what are you reading? Who are you following? What are
Oh,
you?
I think the best approach. It's a really good question because it's such a huge point to not stop
Hmm,
reading and learning and
mm,
doing those things because you can get to stages of your career where you feel like I've got it sorted. I think I know
mm.
everything I need to know. And then you find a new book and read a chapter and you question everything and
You,
I'm an
you,
idiot. I
you
know
get,
nothing. Yeah, yeah. Um,
you get to a point where you feel like you know enough that you don't need to be quite as
yeah,
voracious.
yeah.
Um, but yeah.
But I think the huge thing I try is get a mix. So we
Mm,
talked about social media earlier. There are good pages, people you can follow on social media. YouTube's a great resource now. Plenty of people putting out great content on YouTube. Knowing
mm,
how to look through the research, I'm a big fan of. There's a number of research reviews where people will actually read the research and review it for me, and then you can read through their
mm.
summaries. Because I find a really handy way to stay on top of current research.
You got any of them
Um,
off the top of your head? If you don't, we can get them in
no,
the show
I'll
notes
send through
later.
a couple of the show notes.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, great. Yeah.
blogs, textbooks. I love to read, so staying on top of all
Mm,
books and things like that. plenty of great books about breathing at the moment, which is been a passion of mine for a while.
Mm.
Things like that. So it's just staying across the board and having that balance of sources, I think, is a big point.
Tell us, the breathing thing came out and it was initially probably overhyped and
Hmm.
then overreacted to again.
Like everything in the industry
Um,
swings back and
yeah,
forth.
yeah, and then eventually it settles into this is important. Like it goes from that's bullshit to it goes from this doesn't exist
Hmm.
to that's bullshit, and then it goes to this is everything and that's nothing, and then it's like no, this is a thing, but it belongs here.
Yeah.
Um, how you are kind of a breathing expert. How do you think about it, and how do you talk to athletes about
Yeah.
its implications?
So it's a huge rabbit hole. And if anyone really
Mm.
wants to go down the rabbit hole, they can look up the Postural Restoration Institute
Yep.
and jump down that. But I've found after, books and textbooks and all the research I've done, the two major things that I've implemented in my program are just teaching athletes what the diaphragm is. I feel
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize they have a whole muscle dedicated just for breathing,
Mm.
and teach them how you breathe. So many people think, explaining to my athletes, take a nice big deep breath in, and they're sucking in air and coming up through the shoulders. I'm like, well, you've got this muscle here, down the belly, this diaphragm you should be using, and just bringing that awareness to athletes, which
Yep.
then has feed-ons to being able to relax after a session, brace properly while they lift. And that leads on to the second major one would be I'm a big fan of breathe before you leave, because
Okay.
when you're in the gym training, obviously that's the stimulus and you're getting stronger, while you're recovering. So
Yep.
if you can take an athlete and you can give them that stimulus, and you want to make sure they're in a really good sympathetic state and working hard, but then you want them to recover on the
Yep.
other side of things. So if you can use that breathing to tap into that parasympathetic state, get them to calm down a bit, get some food into them, they're going to digest better. They're going to, the protein absorption is going to be better. They're going to be recovering faster. So I think recovery is a huge, huge point, which I've been reading up a lot about. It's one of my big research topics
Mm.
at the moment. Is training like an athlete, but also recovering like an
Yep.
athlete,
So
because it's
really
such a missed win.
consciously switching into that mode. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got so many questions.
Okay.
So you talked about the breathing for. Let's talk first about the breathing during pre and during training. Then I'll talk about how you're
Yep.
doing that afterwards. Um, uh, how are you coaching someone like someone's just come in and they're your classic massive rib breather? How are you
Yep.
coaching them these days? And for context, I should add, we once had someone have an asthma attack in our gym, and she didn't have a ventilator. And James just, in like 2 minutes, got rid of the asthma attack by teaching her on the spot, under pressure. That was a high pressure situation, teaching her breathing. And I'll never forget, you got her back, you basically got all the symptoms alleviated. She was fine. And then her dad came in and cracked at her for not having the
You're
ventilator.
fine. What are you complaining about? No, I fixed it. She's fine now. Yeah.
Yeah. So how are you talking about and teaching that as a pre, a during, and then let's get to after as well.
Yeah. The simplest coaching cue I like to use is, hand on your upper chest,
Mm-hmm.
and hand on your belly,
Yep.
and then take a nice big deep breath in, and notice which hand moves. And 99% of the time, that top hand is lifting and raising. And so all that means is all those accessory muscles around the shoulder and the neck are doing, you breathe up to 22,000 times a day. They're just doing reps all day
Mm.
long. And obviously, when you breathe, you want to use all the muscles. You're not just using the diaphragm. So that chest component is important. But having athletes realize that you're not using that lower half. That lower hand isn't moving. So when you breathe in, you're not sucking the air in. It's a pressure change. So
Mm.
your diaphragm drops. You increase the volume of your lungs. That drops the pressure, and then air moves from high pressure outside your body to the low pressure inside your body. So you're drawing air in, you're not sucking air in.
That's a
It's
great
a
way to
pressure
explain
change.
it. The pressure change, because people
Yeah,
breathe very effort. It's very effortful. A lot of breathing, whereas it should
yeah,
be
yeah,
relatively effortless, shouldn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
So doing that, and then if they're having trouble lying on the ground and getting 5-10 kilo weight, depending on the
Yeah.
athlete, on their belly, and say move the weight, and then
Right.
they're actually just doing like bicep curls for the diaphragm.
That's so
Um,
clever.
and just training that.
I
Yeah,
love
yep.
that.
So,
And are you
um,
emphasizing the breathing through the nose a lot, or not so much?
yeah, it's dependent on the athlete, I think. Obviously, I'm a very avid runner,
Yep.
and I've obviously been doing a lot of breathing research, and I've done 10Ks breathing through my nose, and experimented with all of that. And I've found it's a bit of a balance.
Mm.
There's certain components of my run where I feel like I need more oxygen, and certain ones where I feel like I'm cruising and I can just stay with the nasal
I
breathing.
can't do it at all,
I
the nasal
think
breathing, when I'm running.
it's quite
it's really
uncomfortable to
uncomfortable.
start. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but you found that you can push through that, and it's worthwhile
I found it's
for your long, slow
when you
runs.
start running, and this comes back to that that girl we were talking about that had that was having
Mm.
those issues, and I was teaching her the breathing. A lot of asthma is just due to breathing too much when you start exercise. So, say you're
Mm.
starting to play a game of basketball and you're breathing really fast in and out through your mouth. What you're doing is you're dumping a lot of carbon dioxide out of your system, and your
Mm.
body actually, carbon dioxide is critical for the body. It needs carbon dioxide to be able to offload oxygen effectively to the muscles. If
Hmm.
you're dumping out all of that CO2, you're now having an oxygen problem, and airways start to constrict. You not feel like you're not getting the air into the body, and so using that nasal breathing, when you're warming up and you're getting started,
Mm.
critical. But I think once you're running, once you're playing your sport, don't overthink it.
Mm.
Just breathe how you feel you need to. If you find you're getting those symptoms early on of feeling like you're getting a bit of asthma, a bit of that shortness of breath in the chest, go back to the nasal breathing.
Mm.
But otherwise, don't think about it. And then at the end, when you're cooling down, get back to nasal.
Okay.
It's a balance. Some people say go all nasal, or it completely doesn't matter. I think if you did it a bit at the start and a bit at the end, and during the run or the game where you feel, I think you're gonna
That's
do
yeah,
really well.
that's a really balanced perspective on it. And so do you still do that? So is that mostly so you'll do it warm as you're warming up, and on your long, slow runs? And how far are you running these
Yeah,
days? Because you've always done lots of trail running and so forth. What's your running like these
yeah.
days?
There's a fantastic trail, which is the Two Bays Trail. It goes
Hmm.
from Dromana through to Cape Schanck Lighthouse, and that's 28 kilometers.
Yep.
So that's my max.
Yep.
So there's a run that they do every year where they run that. So I'm working below those distances.
Okay.
So but it varies. I do anything from a 3K to a half marathon. It
I
just depends on how I'm feeling.
I want to do that run with you so much, but I just still haven't got over your talk about the snakes.
Yeah, yeah. There are snakes. Yeah.
You're so
There are stages where I run with gaiters on, so it's like that protective, sheath that goes over your shins. So if anything gets you,
it just
doesn't get you.
doesn't get you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You run fast enough, it's not an issue.
Well, that's a problem for me.
Yeah,
Okay, so to recap, you want to make sure that you're giving them that sense. You explain that you've got this amazing muscle that can actually create those pressure changes for you,
yeah,
and you give them that kinesthetic feedback. They can actually feel their body doing it, and then a bit of a weight on it. So that's pre.
hmm
In terms of their bracing when they're lifting, now you've got this better setup. How are you coaching that these days?
Well, it goes to
Like on a heavy trap bar deadlift, for instance.
yeah. The biggest thing is people will naturally brace, the right way once you start to load them up properly. I think the biggest thing is having that prior understanding of the diaphragm and its position
Mm.
in the body, and then you can start to elaborate with the athlete once they do start getting heavier. Is you've got that internal cylinder. You've got the pelvic floor on the
Mm.
bottom, you've got the diaphragm on the top, and you've got your core muscles, wrapping around the entirety of it all. And you just want to make sure you've got good alignment in that system. So just
Mm.
using that diaphragm as a reference point of hitting a good position and maintaining a good position, I think is really valuable for athletes. A huge part of my model is to educate as much as I, tell people what to do.
Mm.
And so it's something I've really been using a lot.
And are you coaching draw in, or are you coaching like what kind of brace
Not
strategy are you
really.
teaching people these days?
Yeah,
Letting them work it out
leaving
themselves.
alone. Oh yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Letting them work it out. Of course, if people are having issues and you can see things aren't quite right, and they're really pushing and trying to get that reach that top end of strength, then you
Mm.
dive into the weeds with that a little bit. But I found for majority of the athletes that are either just starting up or building up that strength, You don't really need to dive into that. The human body is pretty clever. It can figure out a lot, and athletes are master at figuring out all these tiny little efficiencies in the body. So sometimes it's just best left alone.
Okay. And then you finish and breathe before you leave. I love that. It rhymes. It's good.
It must be true then, eh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so with that side of things, so what you're trying to do is, to put in layperson's terms, is you're moving from fight or flight, where you actually want them amped up, you want them not over, you want them optimally aroused to lift big things, run fast, hit things. You want that state of not pure adrenaline, but you want them done that into the spectrum. But then once you've finished, every minute that you're spending in that sympathetic dominant state, that is actually a minute you haven't kicked off your recovery. So, and most of us, like, I've been doing, I haven't really thought about this because it's really clever what you're doing. Most of us just rely on there'll be a natural sort of subsiding of their state. So, they'll leave the gym, they'll get in the car, they'll chill out, and probably over the next 20 minutes, they will gradually come back down to a more of a baseline. But you're like, no, let's turbocharge you back into rest and digest so that you really hit that as soon as possible. How are you talking about that, and how are you coaching that specifically at the end? Because people sometimes just want to go when they're done. That might be a bit of a challenge.
They do, yeah. I think if you can implement a good cool down for your athletes, then you can tack that on with no issues. Back to the original reason I looked at implementing this, trying to get into that rest and digest state, was the huge amount of research and data that's gone into the heart rate variability, and how much breathing can change your heart rate variability. So people who don't know, heart rate variability is just the amount of time between heartbeats. The more consistent that time, the more fight or flight state you're in. You actually want a system that's a little more inconsistent, a little bit more adaptable, and able to adapt to stress and things like that. So what I've found is that people that can do something simple like a box breathing, like a 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold, can rapidly change their heart rate variability, which in itself is a really good measure of just nervous system stress.
And do you think the heart rate variability, I conceptualize that as that's a output, like you've moved yourself into a parasympathetic dominant, and then the variability is an output showing that your transition that you've achieved? Or do you think it's an end in itself as well?
Yeah, interesting question. I'm not sure. It's something, it's another thing I've been digging into. I love the fact that, there's so many systems in the body. Your body operates, by itself, like, your digestion, your heartbeat and things like that. And then there's obviously systems you can control consciously, but breathing is one that can be done, unconsciously or consciously. And then heart rate variability is that really good insight into how it refreshes your nervous system and what's it doing. And so when you take those things and put them together, it becomes quite a powerful tool for athletes to, recover and, make sure they're getting the most out of the session.
Interesting area. I'm really looking forward to over the next 5-10 years seeing how, like, for instance, like Wim Hof, who's a breathing, expert, how he proved that you can actually control your autonomic response from an immune system point of view. Like, he can control his.
Yeah.
And he had an experiment where they injected him with he had them inject him with a substance that would normally make you come out in hives.
Yep.
And he started to react, and then he used his breathing to tell his body, no, everything's fine. Do not have a sort of histamine response to this situation. Like, that's amazing.
And then he went on and taught people how to do it and had them do the same thing. And injected everyone, and he taught them how to manage it. It's interesting. That's one of the reasons I love the industry. Is there's so much about the human body that we still are yet to find out. And it's just endlessly fascinating to dig into all those little bits and pieces.
James, those are amazing takeaways. I think for everyone in terms of the breathing stuff, that's brilliant. I love it. I'm going to start doing that in my own training, and
very good.
We'll see how we go. I need all the help I can get at this stage. Any other? So you're now deep into your career, and you've really established yourself in your practice. What would you tell young coaches coming through? Because I reckon it's both simultaneously easier and more difficult these days for a young coach. And we've got a new cohort of interns starting with us sometime soon, we hope. what would your advice be to those interns of ours, but also to other young aspiring coaches?
Yeah, that's what would I want to know when I was starting out? Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a fantastic question. I mean, there's the big ones, just having that continued learning mindset. This is not an industry that you're gonna win or learn everything in. You've got to realize
Mm,
that and realize that you're going to be learning for the entirety of your career. It's you can't do it all.
mm,
I think the biggest one that helped me would be understanding, how to get good feedback out of your mentors and how to implement feedback as well.
yeah.
This is because
You were great at that. You made it
yeah,
so easy to give feedback because giving feedback's really hard. Unless it's high-fiving people,
yeah,
that's easy. Like anyone can tell someone they just knocked it out of the park.
yeah,
But the emotional labor of giving someone constructive negative feedback, it's really, really hard. And most people just don't do it. They just skirt around it and they just tell you what you want to hear.
yeah.
You really made it easy to give you great feedback. How did you think about setting because when you do that, you're setting yourself up to win.
You
If
are
you make
absolutely.
it easy to give you feedback, how did you think about that?
I think it's something that came quite naturally to me, but I have thought about, what are the factors that, have helped me. And I think it's where you place your sense of self-worth and, your ego and your confidence. If you're placing it in what you know, and then you get told what you know is wrong or you're doing something wrong, then
Mm,
that's a real blow. But if you're placing
mm,
it in, I am a lifelong learner, and I want to learn everything I can. And if I make a mistake, it's only a mistake if I do it again. Yeah,
mm.
if I can learn from that, then that's
Yeah,
actually building my confidence, and
yeah.
having the opposite effect. I remember vividly the first bit of hard feedback you gave me. I was bench pressing an athlete when we were back at Body World. I was
Mm,
spotting an athlete. And I was spotting them, and the spotting was fine, and we wrapped it up, and it was all good, and the athlete was happy. And you came up to me and said, "James, that was a fantastic spot, but the coaching was absolutely terrible." And
right.
when you talk about that for about 5 minutes, and you're like, it's so much more than just going through the motions, which is a lot of what you taught at university. Stand
Mm,
here, put your hands here,
mm,
spot it this
mm,
way, do these things. It's about connecting with the athlete, and that was a big thing. And learning to connect with an athlete and motivate athletes, and I learnt that, and then I carried that on for the rest of my career. It's just having all those tiny little instances of feedback that slowly build up to making a great coach.
mm.
So yeah.
Good advice. I love it. That's great. This has been awesome. I had big expectations and it did not disappoint. Thanks so much for coming on the
No
show.
worries.
Can I close out with saying, if you are on the peninsula, if you are an athlete or a sporting organisation, you are bonkers not to be having a chat with James, because you've got a world-class coach who's a relatively well-kept secret, and I have no doubt within the next 18 months, you will be fully booked and you'll be like, I'm sorry, I've got a waiting list. So get in while you can, people. Just a tremendous operator. So yeah, and in terms of show notes, we'll link to your Instagram, and James will also find some of those resources he was talking about in terms of the breathing, a couple of bits and
Absolutely.
pieces for that, and you guys will be good to go. Awesome.
It's good chat.
Yeah, it was
Thanks
awesome.
for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. All right, see ya.
See ya.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that episode. You'll find all the relevant show notes over at coreadvantage.com.au. Also on the website, you can find more information about our athletic development services, education, our short courses, and everything else we're up to. So that's coreadvantage.com.au. Cheers, guys. See ya.